There are places in this world where the unexplained will suddenly become akin to comfort, allowing the bizarre to bleed into the atmosphere. Within the city of Jefferson, Texas, resides such a location, in the form of a hotel that shares the city's name, in which the things that go bump in the night have begun to open doors, roam the halls, and reveal themselves. But the question is why? Why is this happening? Having never been there, I can't answer that question. But on October 1st and 2nd, 50 of you will have the chance to join me for a weekend-long paranormal investigation at AGH Presents The Ghosts of the Jefferson Hotel. Hey, what's up everybody? Chad Calek here, and welcome back to the In a Crowded Room podcast for episode number 144, which is going to be a very special episode. But before we get into it, let me remind you of one thing and make a quick announcement as well. The reminder, of course, is that on October 1st and 2nd, less than 2 weeks away, I will be in Jefferson, Texas, at AGH Presents The Ghost of the Jefferson Hotel. I am incredibly excited about this weekend-long paranormal retreat in which there are only 5 tickets left. For complete information on the event and to get your tickets while they last, make sure you click the ticket link which I have left in the description box below. And secondly, if you guys have visited my YouTube page today, you might have noticed that finally, my Patreon is complete and it is available, and I can't thank you guys enough for suggesting that I get a Patreon. As you guys know, whenever you talk about anything to do with the paranormal, for some reason, YouTube has the most mind-numbing policies, which they don't even share with you. They just demonetize, your entire episode and don't even tell you why. But I've noticed that it often has anything to do with any kind of conspiracies or anything to do with the Roni, as we've talked about. And the great thing about Patreon, which again, many of you have said, I like using Patreon, you should get a Patreon. So I did that with the hopes that I'll be able to stop caring what YouTube thinks about the content that I talk about, and I could stop making up words to cover other words so I don't get demonetized. It's really a ridiculous situation. But my first goal with Patreon is to obviously get to a point where I can hire an editor to handle the editing responsibilities of the podcast, because that is really the thing that is stopping 7 episodes a week happening at an exact release time per night. That's my goal, to do every night at 6 p.m. there's a new episode of the In a Crowded Room podcast. And all it would take is a few hundred people to support me at Patreon. Now, the Patreon page solely exists to support this podcast. But what's really cool about it is I'm going to use it for 2 things, basically. For those who become patrons, you're going to get the chance to be the first to see pretty much everything, whether it's trailers, sneak peek scenes, posters. You will be the first person to see everything I do as far as promotional material goes. Also, it's going to be used to show you all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff. We have so much footage from touring and interviews and past investigations. I mean, when I say a lot of footage, I mean a lot of footage. And that stuff isn't that hard for me to just grab and upload really quickly because I'm not putting a ton of editing time into it. But it'll also be there to include music from the podcast as well. All kinds of just vintage stuff from the past. Brand new announcements, live chats, video chats. So I'm really excited about it. I think you guys will actually love it. If you enjoy the show, I think you will really love it. Also, there will be postings for patrons that are related to the episodes. For example, I'm going to be talking a lot tonight about my relationship and my memories, I should say, with Joey Jordison. Rest in peace, from Slipknot. I obviously made a documentary about my my battles with Slipknot and the war that we were involved in way back in the day. And the name of that documentary is A Clown Short of Destiny. Well, it's actually going to be remade and released probably next year. But when this podcast is over, there will be a small scene from A Clown Short of Destiny that I will put up on the Patreon page as well, so you can see some of this stuff. So if you do want to support me on Patreon and help me reach my goals for the In a Crowded Room podcast, which I would be incredibly thankful for, I've left the Patreon link in the description box below as well. And again, I just want to thank you guys for suggesting that I get a Patreon page, in which I'm very excited about what the possibilities are. So let's see who becomes my first official In a Crowded Room patron. I'm really excited to find out. Having said that, this podcast has actually been a long time coming, and I didn't put it out right away because Joey Jordison, the drummer for Slipknot, passed away, I believe, on the I think it was the 24th or 25th of last month. And everybody, was sending me messages. I got tons and tons and tons of messages asking just how I felt and, what are my thoughts. And look, truth be told, it's not like Joey and I were great friends. We definitely had our issues, and the fact that he passed away, I mean, I'm not gonna, run out there and just say a bunch of bad things about a guy that are based on, by the way, events that occurred, 25 years ago. But I will tell you the truth about those events, and I hope you listen all the way through, because some interesting things happened right before Joey passed away. Some things that I saw that really made me feel for the guy. It made me feel that he had come, full circle from what I knew back in the day. Now, you might be thinking, what is Chad talking about right now? Well, first off, if you don't know the band Slipknot, you don't have to. All you need to know, really, to understand these stories is that Slipknot, for the last, I would say, 15 years, has been the biggest metal band in the world. There's 9 members in the band. They wear these crazy masks and dress like it's Halloween, and they've just been a machine in the world of metal music. And they are from Des Moines, Iowa, and they have a really, it's, I would say, mysterious history, and it's because they've painted a story that's very untrue about kind of who they are and their origins. And I've, when I was younger, I took issue with that because I was in a band that had a tremendous rivalry with them. But it's really weird how the rivalry happened. Because in the beginning, we were actually the closest of friends. So in order for me to kind of share these stories about Joey that I have and the history that I have with him, I have to give you a little kind of history about Slipknot. And the reason I like sharing these stories is because, guys, at that time, I am telling you, it was the frickin' Wild West when it came to the music scene and just what was going on in Iowa at that time, central Iowa. First off, when I graduated high school, it was like 1994. So in 1995, I decided I was done with playing baseball, and I knew I wanted to get involved in something that involved performing, and I'd always wanted to really focus on being in a band. So when I started looking around the central Iowa, quote, local music scene, what I found is that there wasn't one. There was a Des Moines music scene that consisted of about 3 rock bands, no metal bands, nothing heavy, and probably about 60 different cover bands, people that just played cover songs at like these little watering holes on the weekend. And then there was nothing but like folk music. And that was it. And I was like, oh my God, well, I want to be in a band that is like music that I listen to. And at that time, I was listening to like Pantera. I had just made that jump from NWA over to Pantera. Like a lot of young kids, especially in the middle of nowhere, I just had this young, young male aggression, and that's what I wanted to do. When I first started going to check out different bands, because there was no music scene in Ames, Iowa, which is where I went to school at the Iowa State University. It's about 30 minutes from Des Moines, just so you understand the kind of the layout. When I first started going to Des Moines, the first band that I saw actually won the, quote, Battle of the Bands. And this Battle of the Bands had maybe 6 bands in it. But the first band that I saw that I was like, man, they're really good. And I remember thinking that singer is really good. Was a band called Stone Sour, which today Stone Sour has sold millions and millions and millions of records. And it's funny because everybody thinks that Stone Sour is the side project of Slipknot vocalist Corey Taylor, which isn't the truth. Stone Sour is actually his primary project, and Slipknot is very much his side project. It just so happened that Slipknot ended up being more successful. So to kind of jump ahead a little bit to bring this story, or to move this story along, I ended up joining a band called 35-Inch Mutter, and I was incredibly driven to build a music scene because you just have to have one or you can't really play live shows. When we were in Ames, Iowa, there was no venues to play. It wouldn't have mattered if we had, 1,000 fans to come see us. Like, there's nowhere to play. So over the course of a good 6 months, I had befriended the local radio station, the promotions director, and the program director because, again, I didn't have any money. I didn't have anything. I just had the will to go do this and try to make this happen. And, I had nothing to lose, right? I was in a band in a basement writing songs that I thought were pretty good. And 35-Inch Mutter was kind of a hardcore / hip-hop band, kind of like Rage Against the Machine, but it was really right at the same time that Rage kind of came out. It was well before Limp Bizkit. It was a good couple years before Limp Bizkit. And we really enjoyed the music. And I thought, well, if I really enjoy this music, there has to be other people out here that will enjoy this music if they just know it exists. At that time, the way you let people know that things exist was through the radio. You have to remember, this is right at the time that like MP3 burning was just being whispered about. So I just knew if we're ever going to get anywhere, we have to befriend the radio station. And 103.3 was the rock station there that you had to befriend. And I just started going to Des Moines because they would do these live radio events at Hooters. And you would not believe how many people that I actually met going to these Hooters events. One of the oddest stories is I was hanging out with this quarterback for the Iowa Barnstormers for like a year because the Barnstormers were it's arena football. They were trying to break arena football in Des Moines. And they would always send their quarterback down there to do these live broadcasts and interviews. And I probably sat with him and ate chicken wings for a good, a couple dozen times. And it ended up being Kurt Warner, who went on to, win the Super Bowl and become a NFL MVP, which is just another caveat to these stories. Because believe me, if I had 20 hours, I could. There are so many side stories and weird, bizarre things that happened throughout this time period of my life. But what I loved also about this entire time period is the amount of characters that I met. For example, when I was hanging out at Hooters, I was actually going there to hang out with this guy, Sean Elliott, who was the promotions director. And Sean was like this very effeminate, like male that a lot of people thought he was gay, which I could see why they thought that, but my God, he was not. And not that there's, one better or the other. He would kill it with the ladies, but he was very, very effeminate. And he had a brother that we called Close Talking Johnny. And Close Talking Johnny was one of my favorite people that I've ever met. You ever met people that are just close talkers? Like, for some reason, they just need to get really up in your space when they have conversations with you. Well, close talking Johnny took it to a whole new level. He would actually get cocked sideways, cock his head, so he could move his head like even like just right up against your face. And he would get so close at times you'd have to be like, "Hey, Johnny, space, back up." You know? But anyways, through hanging out at this Hooters, I befriended the promotions director, Sean Elliott. And the reason that's important is because the promotions director, that's who they buy concerts. When concerts come through to your city, it still works kind of the same way today. Basically, the promoter bids on the show. So, like, if Rage Against the Machine was coming through, they get the word from their booking agent that Rage is coming and it's a $20,000 buy. Meaning the promoter, if he can put up the $20,000, he can decide, or he could buy the show, but it's his job to promote it, and anything that he makes over $20,000, he keeps the money. That's how he makes his money. So if you're in with the local, promotions director, a lot of times on these concerts, they'll want like a local act to open up for them. And I just knew there were no other real like heavy hardcore music bands that were out there. Stone Sour was kind of like hard rock, but certainly not metal. And that was it. That was the first time around that time period, probably 1996, was the first time that I had heard about this band Slipknot. Because my band started getting played on the radio at 103.3. Again, I had befriended Sean. Sean liked us, liked our music. Through him, I had also met the program director who decides what is played on the radio. Back in the day, the program director could actually do that. They can decide what songs they want to play. Now, it's totally different. It's all Clear Channel bought up all the radio stations and they just cater to record labels. Like, that's it, you know. But back then, that's how it was. So we were very fortunate, 35-inch mutter, in which we went from literally playing Monday nights at a bar that my drummer was the bartender at and I was the bouncer. And literally, we would play Monday nights, and I mean for nobody, man. Like, maybe our roommates and our girlfriends, and man, did we clear out a room. I mean, if there was anybody in there, they would be gone soon. Because, again, nobody did what we did. But I always said, if I like it, I know somebody else does. Well, it turns out I was right. And through the radio station, we quickly, like within a 6-month time period, went from playing for nobody to 600, 700, 800 people. Now this would eventually grow to a fan base of like over 2,000 whenever we'd play a show, which is pretty crazy. But right at the time when we were doing about 200 to 300, 400 people, I heard about this band, Slipknot. And I heard they were incredibly heavy. There were a couple of friends that said, you might have somebody you can, play with. Like, you guys could do shows together. And but the other thing I heard about them that kind of freaked me out is I heard that they did some show where they put up these screens, and while they were playing, they played like this just incredibly disturbing, like hardcore pornography, like the whole time. And I was like, ooh, why would they do that? Like, why would, like, I was just like, it's just such an incredibly uncomfortable idea to bring, because, when you're a new band, you don't have fans. So you bring your friends and your girlfriends and your wives. And I'm thinking, so they brought all their friends and their girlfriends and their wives, and then they just played them hardcore porn while they're playing their music. I can't confirm if this show ever happened or not, but that's what I heard. When I first heard about Slipknot, that's what I heard. So I went and I told my drummer, I said, I hear there's some metal band called Slipknot in Des Moines. and I guess they dress up in outfits and everything, and they wear masks like it's Halloween. But I hear they're really heavy, so we should go check them out. Now remember, at that time, guys, Corey Taylor, the current singer for Slipknot, is not in Slipknot. There's another guy by the name of Anders that is in Slipknot. And the things that I had also heard about the band is that I heard that Anders, the singer, just had a killer, like, hardcore voice, just really grovelly and just really powerful. And I heard the drummer, Joey, was really fast. And I didn't really know what that meant the first time I heard, like, he's really fast. I was like, I don't know, does that mean good? Because, I mean, a lot of, I guess, drummers are fast, right? And a lot of guitar players can be fast, but, if you can't write a song, what does it matter? I mean, Jack White is not a fast guitar player, but he is, in my opinion, like the best guitar player of my generation because he's an incredible songwriter, right? So I didn't really know what to think about, people saying Joey's really fast. And the last thing I heard is that the guy that ran everything was this wealthy guy named Clown. And I was like, his name is Clown? Like someone named him? That's his real name. And they're like, no. They're like, his name is Sean Cran. And I'm like, well, why do they call him Clown? He must not like that. And they're like, oh, no, he prefers that. I'm like, hold on. I'm like, he gave himself the nickname? And they're like, yeah, no, he wants you to call him Clown. He wants everybody to just call him Clown. And again, I was confused. I was like, he wants people to call him a clown or clown? Like, I didn't understand. But all of this stuff, I later learned that this is all part of Sean's, his marketing mind. Sean has always been somebody, Clown I'm talking about, has always been somebody who just, if talent isn't there or if ability isn't there, like, lean on marketing, And in the beginning with Slipknot, they didn't, there were bits and pieces of talent in places, but it just didn't come together, obviously, like it did once Corey Taylor joined the band. Because the thing that everybody knew from seeing Stone Sour, and I knew it from the first time I saw him, Corey Taylor, could sing. I mean, could really belt it out. The dude was an incredible vocalist. 2, he was incredible live. His energy and just the way he would stomp around was awesome. And 3, he was just an absolute whore for attention. And I say that in the most complimentary way that I can, because you have to be. If you're the lead singer for a band, you have to want everybody's eyes on you, and you have to be able to control that and have that desire deep down inside of you to just get everybody's attention and hold it. So everybody in the, I guess, forming music scene at that time, everybody knew that Corey Taylor somehow would find a way to make it. He was just flat out freaking incredible. And I have no problem saying that he stood, heads and toes above everybody else. Like, everybody knew it, Now, put that to the side. So I hear that Slipknot is going to be playing at this club, Harry Mary's. Harry Mary's was like the club in Des Moines that if you were anything from like alternative to like a touring metal band or like a local heavy band, like anything kind of alternative, that's where everybody played. It was pretty much the only club in Des Moines that you could play if you were of, like had alternative music. So I decided that I was going to go down, with Dave, our drummer, and see Slipknot. And so we go down there, and when I got there, really briefly, I knew the doorman because we had been playing there and just selling the place out, packing it out. Like, it only held maybe like 180 people. Like, and that's like, that's really packing people in there like cockroaches, man. It maybe 200. So I knew the doorman pretty well, and he quickly introduced me to Sean Cran. And before he did, he said, "Hey, just so you know, When you meet Sean, if he seems kind of out there in the ethos a little bit, he's just, he's a different type of thinker, um, you know, but he basically don't think he's trying to fuck with you. Like, he's not. He's just a really kind of esoteric kind of thinker. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, so what's his story, And he's like, oh, no, he went to, Iowa University. He's got a degree in art. He's got like 3 or 4 kids or something like that. He's married, and he's quite a bit older, probably a good 15, 20 years older than me. And I'm like, huh, wow, that's super interesting. And he's doing this. And he's like, yeah. So when I first met Sean, he was out in back of the club. And it was so weird because, again, there's maybe 30 people there, 20, 30 people there, and they're all running around like trying to hide their identities, and they're acting like it's super important that they hide who they are. And again, I remember being confused by it because I'm like everybody here knows you. Like, there's not some big fan base here. And at that time, I saw this younger, what I thought was a child that was walking around, and he was kind of dressed similar to Clown, and I honestly thought it was one of Sean's kids because the doorman I talked to earlier, said that he was a father, like he had 3 or 4 kids or something like that, and turns out it was Joey. Joey is. He's very tiny. He's just a small, really, really small guy. Maybe, man, if he was 5 feet tall, that would be stretching it. Like, I mean, really, really, really small guy. And, but what I remember of him is Sean briefly introduced me to him. First off, Sean was totally esoteric. He was just like, I'm like, hey, how's it going, man? And we started just kind of talking back and forth, and he was just talking about he's created something, and it's bigger than him, man. Like, this thing it's got a mind of its own. He's talking about Slipknot, and he was like, we're not even in control of it. We're just hanging on to it, and all this stuff. And I'm just like, okay, that's interesting. And but somehow that led into a brief introduction to Joey, and from what I remember, Joey was kind of quiet, but a nice guy. I mean, he would just said, hey, and said, hey, wished him a good show, and he said thanks, and then we went to see them play. And it was, I don't know, to be completely honest, I enjoyed it. I thought it was, I love their old singer, Anders. He was just so brutal, man. Was it enjoyable music per se? No, I mean, it was just, there were just so many similarities to other things. I mean, again, Sean's very good at kind of borrowing stuff from people. Like, the first thing I noticed, the Slipknot they have like 3 percussionists. So at the time, is like Sean was a percussionist, and then Joey was the drummer, and then, Anders, the singer, was also a percussionist. And when I say percussionist, Sean's hitting a keg. Okay, so with a baseball bat, and he's dressed like a clown and all this stuff. It's just it's quite a spectacle. And but the reason I bring that up is there was another band from Kansas City called Billy Goat that did the same thing. And had each singer had like a big kettle drum or drum they would beat on, or a big tom drum, and the drummer would play it. There was another band in Cleveland called Mushroom Head, which I later became friends with, and they were 9 guys that were wearing jumpsuits with barcodes, and Slipknot was wearing 9 guys wearing jumpsuits with barcodes. There was just so many similarities, and that doesn't mean that you can't look. Everybody that's an artist in the world is inspired by somebody, and everybody borrows from somebody. So I can give Slipknot a pass on all that stuff. It was just. I just remember being at the show and thinking I enjoyed it, but I honestly don't know how far this is going to go. There's just not a lot of, I mean, look, really, really heavy music, there still has to be some sort of musicality to it, some sense of melody or rhythm that you can lock into. And what I enjoyed was honestly the spectacle of it all more than the music. But again, I just didn't think it was going to, go anywhere. But I loved the fact that they were heavy. So when the show was over, Dave, our drummer, and I spoke to Clown again and briefly to Joey, and basically said, we should play shows together. And Sean said, or Clown said, yeah, we'll do that. We definitely have plans for that, and I'll reach out to you next week. And at the time, my drummer Dave and I didn't know what that meant. I'll reach out to you next week. Why would he reach out to us about playing a club that we sell out, just by announcing the show? And I didn't, again, because Clown's so esoteric the way he speaks and everything, I just thought maybe he just, I don't know, just was in his own world or whatever when he said that. But we got a call, about a week later, and it turns out that Clown was very frustrated because the owners of Harry Mary's did not like Slipknot. They did not like them. And they would not put them on national shows that came through. They would not give them a Friday or a Saturday night. And Clown was very frustrated by this. And it wasn't that people didn't, like him or were trying to hurt him. It's just they were doing something so dramatically different. And at that time, again, I can't stress this enough. This is not the Slipknot that everybody knows with Corey Taylor. This is a very different animal. It was just a very aggressive, really just kind of strange, weird concoction of known ideas. And it just wasn't the same animal. But what we had heard is that kind of in retaliation for not getting booked and not getting the nights they wanted and not getting the shows they wanted, that Clown had bought the club. He had physically bought the club. And I was like, wow, that's really kind of crazy, See, because in my world, those things aren't possible. I don't come from money. I didn't have money. I had no way to get money, on that level. I had to use my, college loan money to buy a bass rig, and I was working 3 jobs, So I was just like, wow, I guess I never even thought about that angle. So, one part of me was just like, that's wild. But the other part of me was like, that's kind of gangster too, that's kind of badass. And my hope was, well, they're super heavy. So hopefully now that he owns the club, he'll just turn this into a full on metal club and bring all the acts that we like, that we, hope will come to Des Moines, which he did. And they would often put themselves on the show, and then they would have us play. And it was great. We played tons of shows together with them. This went on for a good year. And through the course of all that time, we got along great. Everything was cool. And, but I could see that there was a real issue developing. And the issue that was developing is that their fan base wasn't growing and ours was. And they kept wanting us to play before them, which we were one of those bands. A lot of bands get a big ego about where they're going to play. I'm going to close the show. We preferred not to close the show. We were like, hey, man, we'll play before anybody. I'd rather play and then hang out with fans afterwards and get home at a reasonable time, man. I was totally down with that. But I could see it was bothering Sean. It was bothering Clown. And at the same time, to make a really long story short, they had signed with this local pop station manager that was trying to get them a record deal. And we ended up working with, like I told you, the program director for the big rock station. Now, those two stations were totally warring, they were at each other's throat, which I didn't even know that was a thing back then. When you hear oh, this radio station's like a rival with this radio station. Like, I'm thinking, well, maybe like in the market and it's good for business to have rivals, but these people aren't really rivals, right? Like, these are the corporations they work for. Like, who cares, you know? No, I found out they're really rivals. And so I remember the thing that really kind of separated everything and really kind of drove a wedge between us was, and this is getting to one of my biggest stories with Joey, was that we had heard that there was going to be this major show coming through with the Deftones and with Limp Bizkit. And at the time, Limp Bizkit was Clown's like favorite act, and they were throwing huge money to get that show and to put Slipknot on the bill. And the Deftones, they were not willing to accept their offer because what the Deftones really needed was radio support from 103.3. So they could have taken more money to satisfy the local, wealthy guy and his eccentric band, or they could take less money and, get the career support that they need. This is the Deftones, which is more airtime. So they obviously chose 103.3, who put us on the bill as the opener. And at that time, we had a show booked also at Harry Mary's to headline, which was, everybody knew it was going to be sold out like to the hilt. That was a door show, meaning like some shows are ticketed where you buy tickets, some are door shows where you just pay cash at the door. That was one thing I noticed too that Clown started doing. He started switching everything to door shows. And the reason you do that is because you rip people off, because it's very hard for us to keep track of who comes to the door with cash in hand versus Ticketmaster, where you have to show up with pay stubs, and at the end of the night they give you ticket stubs. So Sean was definitely up to some dirty shit, and if he says he wasn't, he's full of it. I know he was. So anyways, this show comes, and we play it, the Slipknot Deftones show, and it's an awesome show. I mean, absolutely killer. It was really a coming out for us, because at that point, we had given like 30 new bands their first shows. It was very important for us to build the music scene and get other bands, big basically, so they could start hosting their own shows and open up their own venues. And the idea is that we'd all be friends, and together there'd always be a show and a place for us to play. And so by the time the Deftones show came around, we very much had the support of a scene that we were really instrumental in building. And everybody came out to see it. It was an incredible night for us. Tons of fun. Literally one of the best memories I've ever had as a musician. So when the show's over, I start hearing that, Slipknot is not very happy. And I'm like, really? That's like at us. Like they're mad at us. And everybody's saying, yeah, they're mad at you guys. And I'm like, huh. Well, that is just really, really bizarre, and that sucks. And, I hope that's not the case, but we have a show coming up, and I guess we'll talk to them. So the show comes up, I go in, and the first person I see is Paul Gray. Rest in peace. Unfortunately, Paul is not here right now. And he passed away from a drug overdose. I loved Paul. Always liked Paul. Paul was always a very nice guy. I seen him sitting literally at the bar. I walked straight up to him and I said, hey, Paul, man, I don't want anything to get weird, dude. I'm hearing that you guys are mad at us because we played the Deftones show. Why wouldn't we play it, man? Like, how could we possibly turn that down? Just know that, we weren't involved in any backhanded anything. It was real simple. They wanted Laser to do the show because Laser could promote them. The Deftones I'm talking about, so they went with them. We're working with Troy. Troy put us on the show. That's it. It's nothing to do with you guys. And Paul was actually really cool. he was just like, hey man, I don't want anything to do with any of this, radio station warring bullshit. I could care less about it. You're cool, I'm cool, we're cool. Dude, I came out to see you guys play tonight. I'm stoked for the show. Like, it's all good. I'm like, oh. I'm like, dude, that's freaking awesome. So, I saw Joey around. It was the back of the club that night, too. He wasn't there for long, but he showed up and kind of the same thing. I went up to him and I'm like, hey, man, I just talked to Paul earlier. I'm kind of making my way around when I see you guys. I just want everything to be cool. And Joey was very cool and just said, hey man, as I get it, any band would have taken that show. I totally understand. I'm like, okay, this is cool. So everyone's being like super cool. The clown did not show up that night. He did not show up. Or if he did, I didn't see him. We ended up having an amazing show, packed house, totally, just killed it. Had an amazing, amazing, amazing show. So when that show's over, right away we get a call to book another show. And it's with us and this band, Dead Front, which has this incredible guitar player, Jimmy Root, which, oddly enough, is now in Slipknot. This band, Dead Front, I believe they were the best band out of that entire era. And we loved playing with them because they were just absolutely freaking awesome. So basically, the call we got said, Dead Front has a headlining show. They want to know if you guys will open up for them. Well, the reason you would do that, again, we're bringing a lot of people. So that's a way to say, it's a really cool way to be cool to a band and support them. Because you'll bring your audience, which will show up to see you. And then when you're done playing, the hope is that your audience stays to see that band. Because we love Dead Front so much, and as guys too, as people, they're just all cool dudes. Jimmy Root was my favorite guy in that whole band. Loved him. Had many fun nights with Jim. Their guitar player, Sean Economaki, ended up being in Stone Sour as well too, years later. But anyways, yeah, there's just so many characters of the story. So we said yes. We would love to open up for him. Right after that, we hear huge news. We hear this story that Slipknot is going to be playing this summer festival in which tons of record labels are coming to see him, I guess. And it's going to be like the perfect time, like 4 in the afternoon or 5 in the afternoon at this 107.5. It's called Dot Fest. Like Laser 103.3, the rock station that we were working with, they had what they called Laser Fest, which, like, the difference was, like, Laser Fest would be headlined by, like, Anthrax or, like, Stone Temple Pilots, like rock, rock or metal, like Megadeth, like bands like that. And this 107.5 Dot Fest, it would be nothing but it would be pop acts. It would be like Britney Spears type stuff. So the whole announcement that I heard was so bizarre. I'm like, what the heck? So Slipknot is going to play this Dot Fest? But again, I was like, look, if that's the case and there's a bunch of record labels coming out here to see them, then we got to go out and support, man. Because if by chance, if Clown has somehow pulled off this magical miracle situation where he can, get Slipknot signed through this festival, then, let's support it. It can only be good for everybody. And I really meant that too. If there was a way for a band to get a record deal, especially a band as heavy as Slipknot, because guys, I can't stress enough. I know I've said it like 4 times. The early Slipknot was so heavy. We were 35 Inch Motor was a heavy, heavy band. But they were way heavier than us. And I'm thinking, if Sean could do this would be the greatest folklore tale. Like, this is pure legend and lore. like unfolding in front of our eyes. If this band that has maybe 30 fans, now remember they have 9 members, so if they just each bring a couple people, they've got 30 people, 2 or 3 people. Anyways, I'm thinking if they could play this pop summer festival with a bunch of teeny boppers and could get on the stage and play music that heavy and get a record deal, this will be unlike anything I've ever heard. But the whole thing kind of had that clown stench to it. Like, when I first heard about, the porn screens and all this stuff. And Sean was, Clown was the king of like, he was all tied in with the local like city mags and like city zines and stuff. And there was always some new story coming out with Slipknot in it that was just the wildest story. Slipknot bought a tour bus and they're doing a 40 city tour like in 10 months from now, which never occurred. And there was never a tour bus bought. And Slipknot is, going to Europe and they're going to play a bunch of European shows, which, this is long before there was something which never occurred. And the amount of stories that started coming out about this Dot Fest show, 107.5 Dot Fest, it was like Slipknot's got like, $50,000 in extra lighting that Sean brought in. But the big thing was he flew in a stuntman and he was going to light him on fire. And there was going to be 2 clowns. And one clown was going to be lit on fire and killed on stage. And you wouldn't know which clown was who. And just this is the type of stuff he would do. And again, it was like WWE. It was like the spectacle was so big of it, you just had to see what was going on. And by the time this Dot Fest rolled around, those were the types of rumors that were going around. At this pop festival, there's going to be a guy burning on stage. And, and we also heard that there was going to be something sexual again, something, oh God, what was it? Some BDSM ritual or something was going to go on stage, some rubber ball, like gimp thing or something. Sean was king at this. I mean, Clown was he would just get people believing that the most insane thing was going to go down. And credit to him, because look, man, the whole thing to me was clickbait before clickbait was clickbait, And I'm thinking, I'm clicking, man. I'm going to go see it. So, and we promoted it too. Like we talked to so many people and said, dude, you got to come out and support the Knot, dude. Knot's going for a deal. And I want to stress this too. I can't tell you how far off the concept and idea of getting a record deal was. I mean, you have to remember, this is all going down within like, a year and a half, 2 years. There was no music scene when this started. So the idea of getting a record deal was just so far out. And even if it was a goal, it was definitely my goal from, the second I get in good with that radio station, I could see how I could make this happen. But the reality of making it happen when neither Slipknot or 35-inch Mutter had ever, traveled further than Chicago or Minneapolis. We had never been to LA or New York or anything like that. So to hear these types of stories coming around this Dot Fest show, it's pretty crazy. So there was another band that I loved that was playing, and they were playing at Harry Mary's. And they were called Smilin' Jack. And I went out to see them. And it just so happened, again, that Joey and Clown were there. And they were hanging out backstage. And now remember, at this point, I've already spoken to Paul. And, I spoke to Joey briefly. Haven't spoke to Clown yet, but I just said, listen, this whole thing with the Deftones, like, I hope we're cool, man, because we're cool with you. Like, this isn't some war we're starting. There's not a band in this scene that would have turned that show down. It just aligned where it fell in our lap. We took it. We also brought a big audience, and we did a good job, man. And that's good for the scene, so that's good for all of us. Because we were very scene-oriented. And So, anyways, I go to see that band. Yeah, Smiling Jack is what they were called. And I go to see them, and Sean's there that night. And just the way that he and Joey were both talking to me, it was, they were not being threatening to me, but they were very much talking down to me. Like I was saying things like, "Hey man, I'm just like super stoked for you guys. We're gonna be there in full support, man. You'll hear us screaming for you, dude. Like just kill it, man." And he's just going, "Well, I just want you to know that, we appreciate that." This is Clown now, and he's like, "We appreciate that, and we're gonna be a big band that looks to reach back and help those out who couldn't make it on their own." And I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of a backhanded compliment, right? Are you telling me right now that I can't make it on my own, and you're going to keep track of who supported and you'll help those bands? Because I don't need your help. You know what I mean? It's just like I look, if the way I look at help in the world, if somebody wants to help someone, they'll help them. You know what I mean? It's not something you go and beg for. You can tell someone your situation, and if they want to help you, they'll help you. And at the time it was really awkward because I'm going, "You'll help me, dude. We're drawing like 2,000 people a show. You're drawing 30, and it's going down. Like your shows are getting less and less." Now, I'm thinking in my head, I don't know how you pulled off this thing, with Dot Fest, and I know how. Again, this girl, Sophia John, who was the program director of 107.5, had put them on the bill. But I remember Joey that night too had that same kind of stance to me. I was telling him thank you, and he's kind of nodding his head and he's kind of looking away, like not looking me in the eye, and he's just going, "Yeah, no, I appreciate that," and it's going to be something that's really, really big, and we'll definitely know who supported us, and I'm just sitting here going, "Dude, what supported you? I don't know what this means. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, we've been nothing but cool, period. We played every show you've asked us to play. We've been, we're always willing to do whatever you guys needed. We're supporting you. We're promoting the show. We're coming out." But Joey definitely had that kind of, just that kind of, yeah, it's passive aggressive. You can see that he was pissed. And so, anyways, this show comes, this Dot Fest show, and everybody and their brother is there to see the guy blow up on fire and whatever sexcapade thing they're gonna do, and like all this stuff. And first off, I guess they were supposed to go on at like 5 or 6, and the national act, the national acts that they had booked there, the radio acts, or the record label acts, I guess whoever it was that was booked in their spot showed up and was like, "No, that's not happening. We're not, playing, behind, or I'm sorry, before Slipknot." There's like, who is Slipknot? You expect us to go on during the day so they can have the perfect like evening spot for this? Not happening. So, which that doesn't surprise me at all, because again, these national acts, it's a package. Everything's outlined in the contract of how it's going to go down, and when the promoter buys that package, he has to follow those rules. So we got there pretty early just to hang out, just have some beers and check it out. And we got the word that they were going on at like 2 instead of like 8. And I'm going, "Oh no, man, they're going to go on like in broad daylight," which, man, I'm telling you, there's a big difference. If you've ever seen like Rob Zombie, way back in the day, I saw White Zombie, before it was Rob Zombie, at like noon at this festival. And it was so weird looking because it's bright, right? And I'm thinking, oh, Slipknot is going to do this bright, like right middle of the day in the sunlight, like no ambiance, no atmosphere, nothing. And yeah, they were forced on like way early. And guys, it was the most comical thing I had ever seen. Like, these dudes came out, they were wearing like these really skimpy underwears, and they were painted all black, and they had like the rubber like gimp, like Tarantino gimp balls like stuck in their mouth. And they were like at the front of the stage, like the whole time the band's playing, they're at the front of the stage, and they're making these, yeah, just weird, trying to act like they're evil on one hand, and semi-sexual on the other, and Anders, the singer, is cutting himself, a la Marilyn Manson, with this. He's got this little razor, and he's just cutting the hell out of himself, man. He's bleeding everywhere. And then I guess the fire marshal showed up and was like, "Who's Clown?" And one of the security guys was telling me this thing too. Was telling me this whole story. So yeah, the fire marshal showed up and was like, "Yeah, I don't know who Clown is, but nobody is getting lit on fire." This whole event was like literally set up and staged like in Ankeny, Iowa, on this airfield next to a cornfield. So the dude's just like, ain't nobody setting anybody on fire. It's not happening. Sorry. Don't care what you spent. Don't care who you flew out here. It's not happening. And the big thing is, too, because Slipknot was such an earlier act in the day, how it works with volume is, the longer you go throughout the day, each band gets more lights, more sound, more volume, until finally the headliner gets the full use of the entire system. That's just how these summer tours go. So they turned the Slipknot way down, too. They weren't even very loud. And I literally felt terrible for them. I'm like, this is so embarrassing. It was just... Oh, man. And I mean that because, again, at that time, I had hope that we could build something together, and I could see whether I agreed with Clown's tactics or not. He was trying everything he could, and the band was trying everything they could, and it just, the audience was laughing at him. Like, it was really, really bad. And, again... I remember talking to my drummer saying, this is only going to mean bad things for us, because in relation to them, because that was supposed to be like their, kind of coming out. We're here. We're I got our finger on the pulse of this thing. We're either going to get a record deal, or we're close. And we later heard that nobody showed up either, that they had a bunch of commitments from record companies and nobody showed up. That happens all the time, by the way. That's not anything unique with them. Record companies are notorious for saying they're coming and then not coming. So this, all went down, and I didn't get anywhere near the band as far as like in the close circle after the show was over, but I went to the bathrooms that were by the side, and I remember looking backstage, and I just remember seeing them all like fighting and arguing, and it was just, they were really, really, really pissed off. Well, it was only a couple nights later that we had that show that I told you with this band Deadfront that played after us. And sold out show, completely packed, having the absolute time of my life, having an amazing time. And the show gets over, and all of a sudden, like, our fans are like saying to me, "You got to help him. You got to help him, Chad." And I'm like, "What? Who? What? What's going on?" And I didn't even see them, but Seabone, my singer, said that like all 9 members of Slipknot and their friends, like a bunch of their friends, had showed up, and Clown was in the front row, doing the like gun to the head type thing to Seabone, our singer, and the finger over the neck like he's going to kill him type thing, and that Joey was doing the same thing. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, where are they at? And I look up, and the room's just clearing out. So again, my drummer, Dave, is 6'6", about 420 pounds, played football, or was recruited to play football at Kansas State. He's from New Jersey, grew up in the streets of Jersey City. Very tough dude, has definitely, is definitely thrown down a bit in his life. I'm following him outside, and when I get outside in the street, there is like every member of Slipknot and probably 20 to 30 of their goons. Just guys that'll do anything they tell them. Guys that'll take a fucking bat to my head if they tell them to do it. And what blew me away about Joey that night, they had cornered that Sean Elliott, the promotions director that I was telling you about, who gave us the show, the Deftones show, but Troy Hansen also gave us a Deftones show because he's a program director. They had cornered them, and they were going off basically saying that they should have, let it go and let the Deftones accept their bid. In which, Sean Elliott's trying to explain to him like how the industry works. He's like, that's not how it works, man. They need more than money. They need our support. And I'm standing, so it's basically like our singer who's standing behind Sean and Sean Elliott and Troy Hansen from 103.3. And then there's Joey, and to his left is Clown, and to his right is Mick, Slipknot's big old 6'3", 200 and probably 80-pound guitar player. And the rest of the band, and there might have been a few of them that weren't there, but again, a good 20, 30 of their goons. And Joey is just going off, saying shit. And again, Joey's 5 feet tall, guys. And he's just like saying shit that blew my mind about how he is just going to fuck everybody up. And he will own, he will break our jaws and smash our faces into the ground. And we're so lucky that he doesn't just kick the shit out of us right now, and that he will put an end to this again. And if anything like this ever happens again, he's going to be the one to set it straight. He'll rip our throats. Like, all this, I couldn't believe it. I was like sitting here going, Joey is the one saying this. And clearly he's saying it because there's, obviously 30 guys behind him. And so, yeah, I finally just turned around to Dave and I said, if this thing pops off, dude, we're going to get the shit beat out of us. There's a lot of them. And Dave's like, yeah. And I'm like, so what do you want to do? And he's like, man, let's do it. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. And I go, okay. Now, honestly, guys, growing up in my house, I just came from a place where taking an ass whipping was a pretty regular thing, So when it comes to, fighting, I hate violence. I hate it because I feel like it's, all intelligence fails and that leads to violence, which is so ridiculous. But, getting an ass whipping isn't anything new. So it's just, I know what Dave's saying. He's saying it's about pride. So right before we turn, I've laughed about this so many times. Dave, he grabs my arm again. He pulls me back over and he says, listen, I know we're going to get it. But when this thing cracks off, no matter what, Joey gets it. Meaning that for all this shit he's talking, even though we know we are going to take a bloody beatdown right now, not before we get our hands on Joey. But he was pissed. I mean, Joey was so going at it, just going at it. And thankfully, a series of kind of quick things transpired that stopped any of that from happening. But I remember that night just thinking to myself, how could Joey possibly... He can't really think all the things that he's saying. He can't really think all those things. And it really changed my view of him that night. I mean, being passive-aggressive over competitive stuff, like, I understand that. But it really did change, or the way I felt about him at the time. And it was unfortunate because that night a line was driven between Slipknot and 35-inch Motor. A big-time line was driven between us. So over the course of the next, I would say, probably year, uh, the wedge that it drove is that Sean owned the club. So he owned Harry Mary's. So you had to go through Clown to get a show. But yet we gave many of these bands their first shows to try to build the scene, and we're friends with many of them. So they were all forced to kind of, straddle this divide of where, do their loyalties lie. And again, this is all well documented by tons of bands that you'll see in the in the Clown Show of Destiny documentary. And the Joey story that really kind of broke my heart. Now, again, I want to make sure you guys please listen to the end of this, because there is a full circle that I really believe Joey made, and there's a reason why I'm bringing this stuff up now that I'll get to that's very important to me in life in general. But there was a band that had this beautiful, beautiful girl singer, Alexis Bassett. The name of the band was Smack Dab. And they were very close with us. They were very close with Dead Front, which, again, Jimmy Root was in Dead Front, later joined Slipknot as well. And they were also close with Slipknot, because when we would play with Slipknot, a lot of times we would play with them. Well, everyone was kind of trying to help the Smack Dab band, because we all kind of felt like they could be one of those bands that could really take off and do something incredible. Alexis, again, had an amazing voice, and it was just so beautiful and such a good performer live. And so eventually, Slipknot, because Clown is relentless, and I will give him that, man. And nothing but kudos to the drive this guy has. Since they couldn't really draw that many fans to come see them play live, they changed their whole approach. And it now became about the studio. It now became about spending tons of money and getting these major label quality sounding records that really were incredible sounding. And they just locked up the local studio that everybody recorded albums at for a good couple of years. No one could record there because Slipknot was. And Clown took those demos to all the different record companies and knocked on their doors. And Roadrunner Records finally got it. And they said what I knew they would say. It wasn't a shock to anyone. They said, look, love the band. Anders, the vocalist, way too heavy. You got to have melody. So Clown knew he needed a singer. So Clown went and grabbed the one singer in the entire scene that everybody knew would make it, and went and grabbed Corey Taylor. And who knows what transpired between them two? That's only God and those two guys know what happened. But all it took was Corey Taylor to record, a couple demos, and then I think they played Cran. The rumor was that he paid for Ross Robinson, who produced Korn, Deftones, Limp Bizkit. He paid him to come to Des Moines to see like a show of Slipknot, which they booked themselves at Mary's again. And you'll see people in the documentary talking about it. The night that they, quote, got signed by Ross Robinson, there wasn't even 15 people in the building. Like, there's 9 guys in the band, and they couldn't draw 15 fans. But what Ross Robinson saw is what we all knew about Corey Taylor, is that Corey Taylor is a star. Corey Taylor could be involved in a multitude of projects, and they will find success. He is a star. And nobody thought otherwise. I can tell you that much. So Slipknot ends up signing to his imprint, which is distributed by Roadrunner, and their put on Ozfest, and the rest is history from there. Slipknot hit at a perfect time with Corey Taylor. It was a different band, different sound. The new Slipknot sounded very little like the old Slipknot. Corey Taylor brought that melody. He brought that vocal charisma, the live show energy. He brought all of it, changed everything, and Slipknot just took off. And the timing was perfect. It had been a good 6 or 7 years since Marilyn Manson had a new album. There was no other kind of shock rock artist out there. It was just perfect for them. And to their credit, since then, they've done enough kind of self-reinventing on each album to continue to grow. But the one story that really, it honestly broke my heart through all because I was very close with Alexis, is after Slipknot got signed, and when things started really happening for them, Alexis and Smack Dab were really excited because Corey Taylor had chosen to be on a song on the Smack Dab album called Shadowed. So of course this would be a huge thing for them. Slipknot's blowing up, and you find out the singer is on another album of another local band from Des Moines supporting it. That could mean anything. I mean, it could mean, the song could be, could wind up in, soundtracks. It could mean you can get your own record deal. It might mean that you're close enough you can do some touring with them. Who knows? It can mean anything. So, of course, they're excited about that. And we were excited about it. Again, we wanted to do nothing more than build that music scene because we just knew that would last. That would last. And then I found out from Alexis years later that they got a phone call from Joey. And this filled in so many blanks because I knew they had recorded the song with Corey Taylor, but I knew it was never released. I never knew why. But I guess Joey called and said, straight up, and you could hear, in the A Clown Show Destiny documentary, you can hear her tell the story where she's, claims that she is told by Joey straight up that they are not allowed to release that album. They will deny that it's Corey. They want nothing to do with helping them. They're not going to let, her or her band use them like that. And then it crushed the girl, crushed her. Because she was just like, wait a minute, are we not friends? Like, what is going on? Like, are we not friends? And there were other weird stories too. Like, there was this guy that was in Slipknot that used to wear this like baby face mask. And he used to always come down. We knew what Clown was doing. Whenever Slipknot wanted to throw like a barb into us, whenever they wanted to like drive one of Clown's little knives into our back, they would send this guy Babyface down to the club that I was a bouncer at, and they would hang out with Dave, who was the bartender. Like they told us about, when they released this song, Spit It Out, this guy let us know, in more or less that it was about us. Because it was in response to this song, Full Scale War, that we wrote, which our singer wrote it about them. But the day that Slipknot got their record deal, this guy Babyface was fired. Like, can you imagine that, waking up and you're like, oh my God, I'm signing my record deal today, and you show up and you're fired. And I heard the reason that he was fired is because he dated, years ago, he had gone on a date with Joey's sister. So Joey waited until that day to fire him, which is so brutal, man. So you hear all these types of stories, and based on, my direct experiences with him, yeah, man, obviously I didn't have a great taste in my mouth about Joey. But the thing that I've learned as I've gotten older is everything is perspective, and sometimes you need to have those types of, I don't want to say enemies, because even back then, I didn't view Slipknot as an enemy. I viewed them as an obstacle once I knew that they weren't, weren't willing to support anything to do with the scene or anything to do with anything beyond themselves. And I remember this, hearing for the first time that, Slipknot, they had gone platinum, then they had gone multi-platinum. Even with that back and forth that we had for years, which to this day is Des Moines, Iowa legend and lore, there was still a part of me that had pride. Even though Slipknot wasn't mine, I had, nothing to do with their music or anything like that. A lot of people in the Clown Show of Destiny documentary talk about the fact that there would have been no scene, or Mutter or Slipknot had that war not existed. And that's true because, man, I'm telling you, steel sharpens steel. And Clown was one incredibly driven dude, and I was one incredibly driven dude. I mean, the fact that, myself and he both found a way in life to live, our dreams and are still, going at it and doing what we love. I don't think it's an accident. And, Clown and Joey, they were just so incredibly driven, and both of them just had that mean bone. They just had that mean bone. And I've met people like that just, there's just got a mean streak in them. And if they get the chance to twist a knife, they will, that's how I viewed it, back then as I got older. Now, what's crazy about Joey is he went on to become, at one point, the most, notable drummer in the world. He was, filling in for Korn. He was filling in for, Rob Zombie. He was playing with Metallica. He was just, if you needed a drummer, that's who you called. And again, even being so turned off by so many decisions that he made back in the day, there's always that part of me that was still yeah, it's too bad, man, because that's just such a cool story, And as much as I'm not a huge fan of his style of drumming, I'm more of a fan of Tool and really rhythmic type of, really tasty type of drumming, not just really kind of fast. Look, when it comes to metal, I don't know how you can argue that Joey didn't kind of redefine it. I mean, he did. And whether you like it or not, that's a personal taste. But this guy was being hired, by the best in the world to go do it. And, what else can you say to that besides, dude, you did it. You not only, lived your dream, but you got to go live how many other dreams? How many other people could say, yeah, I went on tour and I filled in for the drummer for Korn. I filled in as a drummer for Metallica. I mean, these are massive dreams. And then the news came down the pipe that was not so shocking to me. Paul Gray from Slipknot passed away. Now, a lot of people didn't know this, but Paul and Joey were the songwriters for Slipknot. Those two would lock themselves in a room, write an album's worth of material, and then when they were done, they would bring it to all the other members, and then, Corey would write his lyrics, and all the other guys would, I don't know what Clown would do. I guess hit the keg. I don't know. I don't know what he would do. but yeah, DJ Starscream or Sid, the DJ would put his scratching in, and they would do the thing. I think Clown would focus on the album artwork and stuff like that. But Paul and Joey wrote all of Slipknot's music, and then unfortunately Paul passed away from opiates. And man, I loved Paul. Like I said, he meant it when I talked to him at the bar. And he was just like, dude, I don't care about any of this stuff, these rivalries, man. I don't care at all. Like, he was like, we're cool. And I could say the one guy in Slipknot that I know that actually tried to help was Paul. And he tried to help Index Case. And what was really cool is when Index Case was trying to get a deal and I was trying to get them a deal, I had just landed them a sponsorship with Mountain Dew. And Mountain Dew wanted to do this commercial with Index Case, and Paul, really against Clown and the band and everybody else, said, yo, I'll be in this, so I said, really? And he said, yeah. So Justin and myself and Joey, we went over to Paul's house, and Paul had nothing but great things to say about Index Case and why he thought they were going to be huge. And it's one of the funniest stories I ever had with Justin because, Slipknot wears the mask. And at that time, they had not revealed what they really looked like. They had still had the mask on, even though there were, photos out there in the world of them. But in the interview, Paul had this, it was like this pig-looking mask. And it was just so funny because, we would be talking about the band, and in between takes, you're sitting there with this guy who's the biggest sweetheart in the world, wearing this, this big black overall outfit, and he's got this big pig mask on everything, and he was like, "Cool, man. So when does your flight take off tomorrow?" It's just so weird. He kept filming, and it was so hard for Justin to not just crack up laughing the whole time. Because Paul was going, yeah, there's not a lot to do in Des Moines, but these guys have really, captured it. I think they could really make it. And you hear that audio, but then you look at the visual of this pig face and it was just sitting in a house, But I loved Paul, man. He was just always a really nice guy. And when he passed away, there was suddenly some drama because, Corey Taylor was very close with Paul. They're like the best of friends. And Corey said, I don't know if Slipknot's going to go on or not. I don't know. I mean, Paul, wrote almost all this stuff with Joey. And Joey kind of fired right back in the press and said, not only is it going on, but I'm already writing a new album. Now, I was not in Slipknot's meetings, of course. I have no idea what that led to, but obviously the rumors in Des Moines were that Corey was not happy. And I know a lot of those guys, like all of us, man, everybody back then had their substance issues. We were younger kids, man. We were just in metal bands, doing what metal bands do. And a lot of guys in Slipknot have had substance issues, including Corey Taylor. And, I don't know. I personally never did a single drug with Joey. I never saw him do a single drug, ever. But, you hear these rumors all the time. And I just heard the 911 phone call, in which the girl, his ex, Joey's ex, calls and she's concerned, and she talks about him being a severe alcoholic. And so I know there's been those issues in the past, and the rumors that I heard, and again, these are just rumors, I don't know if that's confirmed or not, because out of the blue, right after Paul passes away and Joey kind of makes these statements, you find out that Joey's now been kicked out of Slipknot. He's been kicked out of Slipknot. And clearly Joey's not happy with it. He releases his own message that basically says, I didn't quit Slipknot. I would never quit Slipknot. I love it. And he said it was a spinal disease that he had that made it where he couldn't play drums. And he said that's why Slipknot kicked him out of the band, which doesn't make any sense, right? And Slipknot never, commented on it further. And then 2 years later, you find out that Joey has 2 new bands, one called Vivek and one called Sensanum, that he's in. 2 new bands. And everybody's kind of going, well, wait a minute. If you have this disease that makes it where you can't play, like, how are you in these other new bands? And it never really gets addressed. So then, out of the blue, you find out that Joey passed away. And the press release just said, the initial press release just said, Joey passed away at home, comfortably in his sleep. And when I first heard that, I was like, huh? And they claimed that it was from this disease as well, too. And the band Sensanum that he was in put out a message and basically said they did all they could to help him to battle with his demons. So clearly there was some difficult things going on with Joey. And there was all kinds of rumors as, to why he was initially let go from Slipknot the first place. Some rumors were that Corey Taylor got clean and Joey didn't. No one could ever know that for sure unless you're in those meetings with Slipknot. You know the inner, you know what I mean? There's nothing new that I'm suggesting here. But I gotta tell you guys, life has a crazy way of working. Because it's weird that this happened with Joey. Because over the last couple of years, I saw a couple videos of his that totally made me feel like this guy was actually a pretty good guy. And either life had turned him around or showed him, like with so many of us, right? You make mistakes when you're young and when you're stupid and when you're aggressive and when you're just not thinking like you should. And substances have a lot to do with that. That's the crazy thing about addiction in general is just it turns you into literally a different human being, literally. And so when I look back at all that stuff with Joey, again, I think of these videos I just saw. And one of the videos was, this is about a year ago, I came across this video. And it was after Joey had been kicked out of Slipknot. And he was on tour with, I think, Vimic. But he was sitting out in front of this bar. And he was in like either Italy or Germany or somewhere over in Europe. And he's just sitting on the street. And there's probably 30 of his fans that are there. And he's playing acoustic Slipknot songs. Which sounds really bizarre. But these guys are such huge fans. They're loving every second of it. And there's this moment where he basically just stops and just says, look, I just want you guys to all know, how much you mean to me, and what you bring to my life. And you could see just the way he says it, and he goes on longer than that, but the way he says it, it's a beautiful moment. And you could see that he kind of realizes in that moment, or I get the feeling that he realizes that life's not about, like I said, it's about the memories. It's about the love. That's what you take with you in the end, is what did you do that mattered? What did you do that mattered, man? The memories you take, the time you spent, like how many people did you help? How many people did you affect? How many people, did you share a moment with? And there was another interview I saw with him where he was talking about how the reason the Slipknot records are so special to him is that he put so much of himself personally into writing those songs that he feels a connection with every person that bought the album. Because he said, if you connect with this music, then you're connecting with my life. And I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. And again, I remember going, man, Joey's like sounding poetic here. And I just started thinking about just karma and just the way how, if the story was true about this guy getting fired on the day that Slipknot gets signed because he dated Joey's sister, and then years later, Joey gets fired from the very band that he created, which had to be excruciating for him, had to be gut-wrenching for him. And then I think back to, like I said, all the stuff of us fighting back and forth. To me, there's this great part of the documentary about Magic Johnson when he retired from the NBA and how badly it affected Larry Bird. And, Bird did not like Magic at all. But they said he was crying the day that Magic retired. And it was because it was that drive that kept him so sharp. And he knew the one person that he respected more than anyone was gone. It was done. It was over. It was done. And that drive would never be available to him again. He would never be able to take that on. And that's when I look back to those battles that we had back in the day with Knot, with Clown, with Joey. Look, at that time, I'm sure, once they were signed, I'm sure they probably never thought about us again. But at that time, that's steel sharpening steel. That's what that is. That is two or three people that believe in something going up. And that's all. That's one beautiful thing about everything I experienced through that time period is when I started, there were no hardcore bands. There was no music scene to even speak of. There was nothing. And in, a couple years' time, we played one show, it was an outdoor show, where 13 record companies flew to Des Moines, Iowa. 13. In fact, Rick Rubin's right-hand man literally said in the Des Moines Register, the only thing stopping from Des Moines from becoming the next Seattle is direct flights, which is a funny sentence, but a very serious one when you look at what he's saying. And that came from, that battle, just wanting to, we had our reasons for wanting to get there, and they had their reasons for wanting to get there. And, the one thing that I think Clown really mistook is that it's not that people didn't like Slipknot. It's that there was two different Slipknots. The original Slipknot with Anders was so different. It just wasn't built to be a commercially viable machine. The second one was. With Corey Taylor, it was. That was the difference. And I really do think that Sean in the beginning felt like no one supported me. I had to buy my way in. So now, fuck everyone. Where we had nothing but support from the community. We were friends with so many bands. We launched, so many bands into the music scene. The hardest thing to do when you're a new band in the music scene is just to get a show. Just to get one person that'll let you play, for fuck's sake. And we wanted to be that thing. So, once we were fighting back and forth with those guys, I can't be anything but, I guess, forgiving is the wrong term because they don't owe me anything, but I guess understanding that I don't know Joey's childhood. I don't know what he grew up with. I mean, I've heard bits and pieces. I know his family owned a bunch of mortuaries and like a bowling alley and a strip club, and but I don't know what he's been through. I ultimately don't know the deep details of what Clown has been through any more than they know what I've been through. But I know that life has a way of just kind of making you realize, what's right and what's wrong, and the reasons why you should and shouldn't do certain things. And I'm sure, like anybody, you have regrets. And my guess would be that if Joey were around today, and it's incredibly sad and unfortunate that he's not, but I bet if you were around today and you talked to him about what transpired back in the day, I bet he would have regrets. I bet he would regret a lot of that. I know I do. I mean, I wish there would have been a way that we could have found a way to like help more people and just make it a bigger thing, make it that next Seattle. We had a real chance to do something. I mean, bands get signed all the time, but a musical movement like a Seattle and England, like there's just very in Atlanta, right? There's very few of those that ever come along. But that's how I view Joey, man, a worthy adversary. Same thing as all those dudes. And now looking back on it, what a wild ride. And if there was no Slipknot and no like kind of Slipknot Mutter War, I probably wouldn't be sitting in LA right now. I don't know. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have got here or I wouldn't have. It certainly wouldn't have been this route. That's for sure. You know. And to Joey and his family, man, God bless all you guys. I hope to God that he did pass in his sleep. 46 years old is too young, man. That's so young. Oh, man. I'm truly sorry to hear the news that he's gone. And I do believe that his music will live on forever. I do believe that. And he lived for that music. I can definitely say that. He lived for that music. So all you that wrote in and wanted to know what my memories of Joey, what my memories were with him, of him, in a nutshell, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this extra long episode of the In a Crowded Room podcast, and I will be back tomorrow with more. All the best.